Welcome to the snapshot of What the Dog Saw and Other Adventures by Malcolm Gladwell. Here, we'll explore the key insights from What the Dog Saw. Introduction. Malcolm Gladwell became fascinated with the minds of others when he realized that his father, a mathematician, spent his days with symbols and equations that had no meaning for most people. All human minds are different. Our unique perspectives and specialized forms of expertise attest to the overall brilliance of the species. What can brilliant minds teach you, not only about their topics of expertise, but also the nature of human intellect? In examining some of the most distinctive minds, Gladwell explores a few basic lessons of human existence. Methodology. Why study a genius? When observing moments of inspiration or bearing witness to the power of genius, most humans react with the same question. How did that feel? What does it feel like to be a surgeon who holds a life in her very hands? What does it feel like to make the first solo flight across the Atlantic Ocean? What does it feel like to walk on the moon? Understanding any type of genius, in other words, figuring out how it feels to be brilliant, requires an insider's perspective. It is not enough to study the habits and words of a particular innovator. One must also know how a genius thinks about her own field of mastery. This means seeing a human cavity through the eyes of a surgeon, or examining the horizon as a pilot does. What follows is an investigation into the minds of a few different geniuses. By understanding how a brilliant thinker experiences her work and herself, it's possible to understand not only the most creative minds, but also a few basic truths about human existence. Genius is a loaded term. Most of us associate this label with the most obvious and influential discoveries: penicillin, relativity, electricity. As important as these discoveries certainly are, this particular inquiry will be more fruitful if one assumes that genius can be mundane as well as magical. Genius need not be seen purely in terms of its rarity. The history of human culture is replete with all kinds of genius. The more you examine its many forms, the more likely you will be to encounter whatever many lessons that genius may contain. For this reason, this exploration assesses the examples of genius that don't always garner attention in history books or newspapers. Hair care as a feminist frontier. Two brilliant minds forever changed the advertising landscape for women's hair color. Their professional work and their personal stories create telling testimonies about the dimensions of feminist thought. In 1956, Shirley Polikoff was a junior copywriter in charge of designing an advertising campaign for Ms. Clairol, a revolutionary product that allowed women to color and tint their hair in the privacy of their own homes. For Polikoff, a product like Ms. Clairol was a welcome relief because it allowed her to attain her preferred shade of blonde without the expense of the beauty parlor. However, hair color was still a divisive topic, especially for aspiring blondes. In the 1950s, manufactured blonde hair was reserved for chorus girls and prostitutes, not respectable housewives and decent working women. Nevertheless, Polikoff was unable to resist its platinum allure. Polikoff created the advertising slogans that sent Clairol to the topic of the market. Does she or doesn't she? Only her hairdresser knows for sure. And the closer he gets, the better you look. These taglines were always paired with domestic tableaus and familial scenes, a wife preparing for a dinner party, or a grown woman whose new hair color matches her daughter's naturally youthful shade. These campaigns depicted the freedom of hair color as a liberty belonging to all women, not just the so-called loose girls. Now, housewives and mothers were free to possess the glamour they desired. Almost 2 decades later, another female copywriter created ads that would illustrate the progress of feminism. At the McCann Erickson advertising agency, Elon Specht was trying to create a campaign that would help the French company L'Oréal cut into Clairol's high sales figures. The year was 1973, and feminism was changing how women thought about themselves. Specht was tired of male colleagues who could only imagine women as glamorous objects who wanted to look good for their husbands and boyfriends. Her frustration inspired a new advertising angle. Specht is responsible for creating the tagline, "Because I'm worth it," which launched L'Oréal to the top of the industry. The differences between these two ad campaigns illustrate two distinct veins of feminist thought: the freedom to assimilate and the freedom of self-care. While the former normalizes the pleasure of becoming what men want, the latter depicts the pleasures of self-indulgence. While Polikoff's strategy views women from a male gaze, Specht's approach was to capitalize on a woman's power to view and care for herself. These strategies are more than advertising. They also reveal how products interact with psychological landscape. The relationship to products has become just as personal as a relationship to emotions, memories, and ideas. Products have just as much power to shape how consumers view and make sense of themselves. In some respects, Polikoff's campaign was so brilliant because it resonated with a deeper human dilemma. To be a woman, or to be Irish, Italian, Jewish, or black, was to feel the remarkable pressure to assimilate. These identities came with the pressure of abiding by the standards of a dominant majority, while also being painfully aware that deep down you were someone else. To be anything other than male, white, and straight means enduring the constant burden to accommodate someone else's preferences. While Polikoff's slogan represented a form of freedom, it also played on the elusive satisfaction of finally becoming what others want you to be. Specht represented the changing ideas of feminist sentiment. Her work portrayed a new hierarchy of values that prioritized self-care over self-assimilation. What's more, Specht was a very different type of person, dark-haired, domineering, and unconcerned with gender roles. Although Polikoff was just as powerful and professionally successful, she at least paid lip service to a woman's role of submissive helper and dutiful housewife. Even if she herself failed to conform to those standards, Polikoff still extolled the importance of such a role. Examining the work of these two very different women not only offers a window into their personalities, but also illuminates the psychological realities that made their creative work so engaging and attractive. Their ads represent more than beauty products. They also express the cultural norms and attitudes of an era in flux. Canine behavior and the psychology of power. Cesar Millan is more than a dog trainer. The head of the LA-based Dog Psychology Center and the host of The Dog Whisperer, a television show on the National Geographic Channel, Millan is a master of psychology. In each episode, Millan tackles extreme canine misbehavior and replaces aggression with peace. At the center, Millan cares for almost 50 dogs, all of whom have a history of violence against humans and their own stories of abuse. Yet the center is a calm and peaceful community. Millan's soothing relationship with violent dogs is not the product of an iron fist or a loud voice. Instead, Millan reinforces good behavior through the power of his body language. On a sunny day, Millan leads some 4 dozen dogs into the center's backyard. He throws several plastic balls in every direction, and his many friends happily run free. After 15 minutes of play, Millan collects the gang, not through force or shouting, but with one short, sharp, authoritative whistle. The dogs stand at attention. Millan nods toward the gate, and his pack follows him back inside. It is the authority in his posture and the relaxed confidence of his gestures that allows Millan to both soothe and direct his dogs. Dogs are better at observing human behavior than chimpanzees are. They sense that a forward-leaning stance is more aggressive, and that a human who is leaning back by even a fraction of an inch is non-threatening. While cocking your head to the side will disarm a dog, a straight-on gaze will read as a red flag. Human behaviors even influence how dogs interact with one another. If a dog owner is walking a feisty Rottweiler who has a history of violent behavior, the owner might tense up when he and his canine pass another dog walker. The owner might hold the leash more firmly or regard the other dog with concern. The Rottweiler will sense his owner's anxiety and sense that the other dog is somehow to blame. Consequently, the Rottweiler might bark or lunge at the other dog, not because the Rottweiler is inherently violent, but because it perceives that the presence of another dog is causing angst for his owner. When you think of a powerful person, perhaps you think of individuals who know how to take up space. They speak with loud voices, they spread out across multiple seats on the train, and they behave with brazen disregard for the feelings of others. They voice unpopular or even hateful opinions because they feel immune to the disapproval of their peers. They force other people to submit to their will because they know they can get away with it. However, power is more than a domineering attitude. In fact, when it comes to Millan's line of work, loud behavior actually gets in the way. The true exercise of power comes out of how a leader carries herself, not how she bends others to her will. On a 2005 episode of Dog Whisperer, Milan tried to tame a Korean Jindo named Johnby, an adopted stray who was well-behaved on walks, but a terror at home, especially when his owner, Scott, tried to force the dog to submit to his commands. As John B. began to fight with Milan, the dog whisperer refused to lose his composure. John B. began to thrash and lunge, but Milan stood up straight and held his end of the leash high above John B.'s reach. With each squirm and jump that John B. made, Milan moved with him, reconfiguring his body to accommodate the dog's movements. However, Milan was not fighting back. Instead, he was creating a safe physical space in order to contain John B.'s aggression. As the interaction progressed, it became clear that John B. wasn't really fighting either. He was having a tantrum. While human attempts at force would have only exacerbated John B.'s meltdown, Milan used his body to communicate stability and consistency. By containing John B.'s aggression without forcing the dog to submit, Milan communicated a vital message. I am here. I am strong. You are safe. When Milan finally did touch John B., his caresses were firm but affectionate. They offered the comfort of a stable caregiver, not the oppressive, agitating power of an owner. Susie Tortora, a dance movement psychotherapist, sees the power in Milan's approach. She uses the same strategy with severely autistic children who struggle to regulate their emotions. Instead of using discipline or reasoning to calm them down, Tortora responds to a toddler's duress by mirroring their movements. If her patient throws himself on the ground, Tortora does the same thing. When he sits up, she sits up. When he runs across the room, so does she, only in a more calm and graceful manner. She faces her patients as symmetrically as possible in order to physically communicate that she is present, stable, and safe. Tortora knows that strict force won't help these particular patients learn how to self-correct their behavior. Instead, they need stable spaces and relationships in which they can safely experience their emotions. By embodying strength rather than wielding strength, Tortora demonstrates to her patients that their emotions aren't as destabilizing as they might seem. For Milan and Tortora, power is not a matter of force, physical strength, discipline, or obedience. True power does not command. It solicits. True power does not enforce the proper behaviors. Instead, it creates the right climate in which the proper behaviors can be freely chosen. Power is not might. It is the ability to embody stability and safety. The most powerful person is not the individual who speaks the loudest or who dictates obedience. It is the one who treads softly and embodies her own stability. The Art of Failure. When considering the most glaring failures, tennis champions who botch a winnable match, pilots who struggle to safely land, it's commonly assumed that all failures are alike. However, not all failures are equal, and by learning more about how humans fail, it's possible to gain a better understanding of failure prevention. One of the most basic distinctions is the difference between panicking and choking. Consider the final set of the 1993 Wimbledon final, in which Yana Novotná held a commanding lead over her opponent, Steffi Graf. Just as she was poised to claim her victory, Novotná unleashed a series of bad serves. Her swings were weak, and her torso was disengaged. By the time the match was over, Novotná's professional prowess had reverted to that of a beginner, and she lost the match. Humans learn through two basic mechanisms, explicit and implicit learning. Explicit learning is for beginners. They tell themselves to throw the ball to the proper height, move their arm in a particular way, and keep their feet in a certain stance in order to perform a tennis serve. Implicit learning, on the other hand, occurs outside the bounds of human awareness. It happens when a young athlete plays enough tennis and naturally adopts the strategies that make for a win. Implicit learning occurs when an amateur unconsciously internalizes the prowess of a champion. If explicit learning is the memorization of technique, implicit learning is the phenomenon of muscle memory. When Novotná blew her stunning lead at Wimbledon, her playing resembled that of a beginner because her nerves caused her to play with a beginner's mindset. To overcome her anxiety, she told herself to do all the right things, serve this way, hit that way. She played like a beginner because she was talking to herself as a beginner. She was mentally returning to basics instead of relying on her honed professional instincts. This reversion to implicit learning is a trademark of choking. However, the basis of choking, the return to basics rather than instincts, is not always a terrible option. Consider the tragic plane crash that killed John F. Kennedy Jr. one July evening in 1999. Kennedy, an amateur pilot, crashed his small plane because he failed to keep his wings level. This error occurred because Kennedy was comfortable with instinctual flying, but not instrumental flying. On a clear day, instinctual flying is comparatively simple because all a pilot needs to do is observe the horizon and make sure that his wings are even with it. However, at night or in foggy conditions, a pilot must rely on his cabin instruments to know if the plane is level. Due to the nature of flying, it's possible for a pilot to feel like his plane is level, even if it isn't. So when he can't visually fact-check his instincts, he needs to rely on the plane's instruments. It's likely that Kennedy wasn't even aware that his plane was in such a severe spiral dive until it was too late. In Kennedy's case, the reactions of choking, which involve the return to basic teachings, might have actually saved his life. By relying on the explicit lessons of piloting, he would have known to check his instruments instead of relying on how the plane felt to him. However, Kennedy's reaction was the opposite of choking. Panic occurs not when you revert to basic principles, but when you place too much reliance on instinct. For instance, a panicked scuba diver might instinctively try to rip out his partner's air supply, rather than remember the basics of a partner dive. That one diver always carries enough air to support both divers and can help his partner during distress. In this example, the panicked diver isn't thinking. He's simply reacting to his primal, survival-oriented urge to get air any way he can. Like the panicked diver, Kennedy perhaps relied on his instincts. He couldn't see the horizon, but his plane felt level enough, so he never bothered to check if this was actually true. If choking broadens human thinking to the point where an athlete thinks too much to play well, panic shuts down the brain and refocuses on physical instinct. Panic causes too little thinking, while choking inspires too much. They are, in fact, opposites of each other, yet their discrepancies illustrate better strategies for reacting under pressure. The key to success is knowing your type of failure, knowing how you instinctively respond to it, and training yourself to do otherwise. Conclusion. Human genius comes in many forms: marketing gurus, animal whisperers with uncanny power, brilliant yet fallible athletes. Their stories offer insight into their unique creative processes and also provide windows into the basic truths of human existence. When you're able to experience the interior landscape of genius, you're also ready to discover new insights about yourself. About Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell is a best-selling author and has been a staff writer at The New Yorker for over 2 decades. Thank you for listening to the snapshot of What the Dog Saw by Malcolm Gladwell. If you liked what you heard, then make sure to explore the rest of our snapshot library to continue gaining key insights from nonfiction books in a matter of minutes.
Thank you for listening to our quick learning audiobook review series. If you liked what you heard, then check out our channel for more free audiobook reviews. We post new audiobooks every week. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell to be first to hear of our latest reviews.